On this episode of Survive and Thrive 8791, we welcome former educator Kristan Nielsen to the show. Kristan will share how she took a leap of faith and made a career change. She will share how she made her health a priority, having supportive people to lean on, and having goals and a plan that made the transition less stressful. This will be a good one. Here we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What is up? Welcome to another episode of Survive and Thrive 8791. I'm your host, Coach Decora. We are in the Buck and Honey's remote studios in Waunakee, Wisconsin, just north of the capital city, Madison, Wisconsin. You can follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube at Survive and Thrive 8791. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at tdecora8791, as well as hitting me up on Facebook at Tim Decora. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to the show. Leave us a comment if you liked what you heard. If there's a topic or you know a guest who would love to tell their story, email me at tdecora, that's TDECORAH at gmail.com. Glad you could join us today wherever you happen to be. Our mission is to share stories and conversations that make you cry, laugh, and think, stimulating emotions, creating laughter, and inspiring the mind. A new episode will be released on Monday and Thursday morning, featuring a wide range of guests. The podcast will touch on many subjects such as grief, loss of a loved one, recovery, professional setback, divorce, success despite challenges, etc., etc. Our guests will share how they learn to survive and thrive. Today, we welcome a good friend of mine, Kristan Nielsen, to our Buck and Honey's remote studios. Raised in Waunakee, Wisconsin, she started with her first, quote, real job in retail, working for J.C. Penney and the Pottery Barn. After graduating from Waunakee High School, she took a job on campus while attending the University of Wisconsin. After college, Kristan worked with individuals with intellectual disabilities as a job coach, and that is what inspired her to pursue a degree in special education and become a teacher. Her teaching career would start in Verona, Wisconsin, with a year in nearby Middleton before returning to her alma mater, Waunakee Community High School. She has been happily married for 19 years to her husband, PJ, and is a proud mother to 4 awesome daughters, Arya, Ava, Ayla, and Annika. Welcome to the show, Kristan. What is up? How are you?
I'm great, Tim. How are you today?
I'm doing good. As we record the game, I understand that you have a little bit of an allegiance to a team out of Chicago, football team. And of course, the viewers and listeners know, hopefully, that I'm a huge Packer fan. You're a Bears fan. Tell us a little bit about that.
I am. And as I was leaving today, my daughter mentioned that, Mom, the Packers are playing the Bears. And I thought, man, I really should have on one of my, Bear sweatshirts. But I figured I would keep it neutral today, Tim, for you and the sake of, the podcast, just so we made sure we could keep our rapport up. But I've been born and raised a Chicago fan, the Bears, the Cubs, the Bulls. Never really got into the Blackhawks, but that was, kind of shared through the family bloodline. My dad was raised a Chicago fan since, his father was from Chicago. So been Bear fans all of our lives, living in Indiana as Bear fans and now living in Wisconsin as a Bear fan. It's rough. It's not easy some seasons, most seasons.
I'm sure.
Since 1985.
I'm sure it isn't. That other little connection that I did not know, and this is fascinating, that you have a little connection to the Capones.
Yes. So this is my grandfather, who I mentioned I never had the opportunity to actually meet. He passed away before I was born. Both of my parents are from the Upper Peninsula, Ironwood and Hurley.
The
Upers. And so my grandfather had a very strong friendship with Ralph Capone. And that friendship started in Chicago. Ralph convinced my grandpa to move up north, which is
up north
to the Uperland. And so he ended up moving up north, and the rest is history, really. They maintained a friendship throughout their lives. My grandma always had some amazing stories that she would share with us. You know, we were just completely enthralled by hearing about Little Bohemia, hearing about the time that my grandfather and Al Capone got into an argument at a bowling alley. My grandfather...
I'm not sure you want to get in an argument with Al Capone.
You don't. Well, my grandfather apparently then kicked Al Capone in the butt, and that led to a conversation outside. Thankfully, nothing transpired outside other than "don't ever embarrass me again" type of deal. But yeah, so we one Christmas, my brother was able to obtain Ralph Capone's little black book. And in there is my grandfather's name and address and phone number. And so that was something that was really important and special, and that we wanted to give my dad, just to have a little piece of his past. And you know, his father died when he was in his early 20s. And so, yeah, it's been a really, you know, it's been fun to hear the stories and to be able to share that, you know, piece of our family history.
So he gave Al Capone a butt kicking.
Yep.
He kicked his butt.
And
then let's go back quick. Ralph, I can't remember if that was Al's big brother or little brother.
Little brother.
Little brother. So yeah, that is so cool. I mean, I've got a lot of other questions here, but I think
we could talk about that all day.
We could talk about that one all day. We'll have to have you as a guest, a second guest as well. So, what has been happening this fall with the Nielsen kids? There's 4 of them, and then if you lump PJ in as just an older kid, what's been going on in the Nielsen family?
Absolutely, we spend a lot of time at soccer events, soccer games. We have, you know, 3 of the girls that are playing. We have 2 that play out of Milwaukee. They play for a club called FC Wisconsin. And then Annika plays for the Waunakee Area Soccer Club. Ava and Ayla travel a lot for soccer. We just were in Chicago this past weekend. I just returned from Phoenix with Ava, my junior, for a college showcase. We will be heading to Michigan this weekend. So it is nonstop travel soccer. We sometimes question you know, what the heck are we doing? We find a way to make it work, thankfully. Annika joins us for some of those trips, not all of them. Thank goodness for Grandma and Grandpa. She loves to spend time with them. And then the oldest, Aria, is a retired soccer player and is a college freshman at the University of Iowa. So we get to, you know, see her when it allows. We actually got to see her once when we were driving down to Nebraska. So we stopped, a little pit stop to see her. So yeah, we are constantly moving. I mean, it just, there are very few weekends where we are home as a family doing nothing. And by nothing, I mean cleaning and laundry, because that's, you know, that takes up the week.
That's the normal stuff.
That's the weeknights. Yeah. So we're just a busy family, and, you know, we find a way to make it work. And thank goodness, you know, my husband is a software developer, and he has some flexibility in his position, and that allows us to manage having 2 kids practice out of Milwaukee. We have really great carpools too. That's the only way it really can work.
Yeah. Well, I know that's probably going to be a little bit of you're talking about it now, but that's kind of one of the things that's helping you survive and thrive, is you've got some of those things that are built in. So yeah, I know we joked about the professional scheduler, but sounds like you've got that worked out. So we're gonna jump into our sponsor promo here quick, and then we'll get into segment 1. So our sponsor, Buck and Honey's restaurants, are making an impact in the communities where they are, much like you have done with the Waunakee community and the school district. Great food, 5-star customer service, and a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere are what keep people coming back, with a location right here in Waunakee, Monona, Mount Horeb, and the home office in Sun Prairie. There's one close by. Have you been to Buck and Honey's yet?
Of course.
Of course.
Oh, I have my favorites. The Thai chicken pizza is my absolute favorite.
To die for. There's 2 things I would recommend. First of all, the firecracker chicken. or I'm sorry, firecracker shrimp is really good. And then my favorite since I was in the mid 80s in high school myself, Tommy Anderson, who owns Buck and Honey's, his dad owned a restaurant in the Dells where I'm from, and they take the same ingredients and make the pizza the Bomber Special. His dad's nickname was Bomber. Is the pizza that I've loved since the mid 80s. So the Bomber Special, next time you go,
Okay.
grab that. So
Perfect.
segment number 1, we're going to try to wrap this up in, if we can, about 12 to 15 minutes, but I know you've got great content, so that's going to be good. We're going to talk about teaching. You loved your job. So just a couple notes here. You mentioned the agency Integrated Community Work, where you were a job coach and developer for individuals with intellectual disabilities. Now, I know it's been a few years since you've been back there or there. Tell the listeners a little bit about that, some of that work that you did with Integrated Community Work.
Absolutely. So I took a job at Integrated Community Work after I graduated from the UW in 1999. I graduated in December. My plan originally was to start studying for the LSAT and hopefully, do well on that and get into a prestigious law school. I decided that...
I could see you as a lawyer, by the way.
PJ would tell you that I do like to argue and get my way, but and I'm passing that down to the girls, of course. But I decided that I needed a job in the interim, and I, started looking and came across this ad for a position at Integrated Community Work, and I was intrigued. I thought, this is something I would be willing to try. Now, mind you, all along there was this voice, known as my mother, saying, you should be a teacher. You should be a teacher. But, because I knew more than she did and clearly had more life experience than she did, I tuned that voice out. But I did end up taking this job and instantly just felt a connection. The job consisted of working with individuals in the Madison community at their job sites. We would also do recreational activities, so it wasn't all work. There was fun involved too. And then I was also responsible for reaching out to area businesses and talking about the benefits of having individuals with intellectual disabilities working for them. There were some wonderful businesses that we supported individuals, and I learned so much about disability awareness, disability rights, being an advocate. And at that point, I decided, you know what, I'm going to listen to that voice and I am going to no longer pursue law. And I decided to go back to school that following fall. So I worked for Integrated Community Work from December until July. And then I went back to school at the UW and started my teaching degree at the UW.
I'm glad you listened to that voice, because I'm sure what the people that you worked with in Verona and that you're in Middleton, and certainly I know about your presence here in Wanakee, we definitely are glad that you listened to that voice way back when. So you talked about some of the rewarding parts of that job, of working with those students and people. What was there anything else that was rewarding besides that?
I think it really was founded in building relationships. And what I found was that was something that I was really good at. And at that point in my life, I didn't know what I was good at. I was still soul searching, and you start to wonder and you start to lose some self-confidence through that process. And here I finally found something that I was good at, and people were telling me I was good at. And that was hard for me to accept. It was hard to accept compliments and to have people saying, you're really good at what you do. And it was like, oh, yeah.
Downplaying it like a lot of people do.
Yes. It's really, we're not great at accepting compliments. And so I just kept moving forward with my studies, and I ended up doing a stint with the Wiseman Center. It was allowed me to work with families with low incidence disabilities. So that was another piece of it that helped support me through my studies, returning to school. There are so many rewarding things that I can think about that shaped, who I am and my journey. But I honestly, I always come back to the relationships. Whether it was a relationship with a family, whether it was a relationship with a professor, whether it was a relationship with one of my, cohorts in my program, those are the pieces that really shaped me. And that's what I carried into my professional life, is I started realizing that, these relationships are what are going to really make it or break it for me in the long run. And especially with teaching and special education, it's a very emotionally demanding job. And I just wanted to make sure that I was always thriving in that area of building those relationships with kids, with my, with staff, with families. So for me, that was the piece that kept me going.
Yeah. I mean, I already loved one of the words you had me at thrive, the thrive part. So, and relationship building. Yeah. Just, I've heard you say now, you talked about your colleagues, you talked about the parents, you talked about the kids, your professors, those people that go through the program with you are probably still your friends to this day. And then I remember you talking about the job sites that you had to go to build some trust that you're going to send these kids or these young adults in to work for them. That probably helped them, and then it also helped for your placement of those students. So besides the rewards, there are always some parts of the job on the other side of the coin where it isn't always fun. And I know we've talked a little bit about that. You're more on the positive side, but I also want you to delve into there can also be some downside to it. And I think our listeners need to know that it's not always roses and happiness, but that when some of that negativity comes in, what do you do about it? So what were some of the less than desirable parts of that job?
Absolutely. None of us will ever want to live and swim in that pool of negativity. But for me, what I noticed about myself and what I found out about myself is that I was very emotionally tied to my work, to my students, as I should be. Mm-hmm. But I was not good at separating school from home. So we have a lot of students, and I was making connections with just as many students who were not part of my caseload, who were not even identified as having a disability, but students that I just came into contact with, who found maybe my contact time to just be a time where they could come in and talk to someone. Mm-hmm. And so I started to carry a lot of the burdens of my students kind of in my soul, like in my heart, because students were going through so many things. And this is before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. This was not just a direct, COVID hit, and now we have a lot of students who are struggling. We had students who were struggling long before COVID hit. So for many years, I was carrying a lot of the burdens that my students were going through, and I wasn't good about knowing how to turn that piece off. Because when I went home, my own kids needed me. And I found that I was just emotionally exhausted most days.
They needed mom, they sometimes got Mrs. Nielsen.
They often got Mrs. Nielsen. And even through talking with some of my closest coworkers and knowing this was a piece of who I was, they could see that I was struggling with that. And everybody had great advice, and I always appreciated the support, but I truly didn't know how to turn that off. Eventually, I had to make some hard decisions. I had to start thinking about myself and my own mental health and my family. And that was when my parents presented me with the opportunity that my mom knew I was struggling. You know, she was my biggest supporter as a teacher. And she would always
That
say,
voice.
that voice. And she was my biggest supporter, but she could see that I was struggling. And nobody wants to see their kids struggle.
No.
Even as a 40-plus-year-old, nobody wants to see their kids struggling. And so she presented me with an opportunity if I needed to step away, because I could have never have stepped away without a plan. I don't live my life that way. I have 4 kids. They like to play soccer. It's not free. Financially, I have to work. And so I had to do some very deep soul searching.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I had a teacher on last week as well, and she talked about this. And those of the listeners that are out there right now, you got to understand one thing about if you want to be not real happy with your kids' teachers, almost all teachers are super dedicated, just like you. Take the work home. Their work day is not done at 3:45. They're going to go home and be a mom or a dad. And then once the kids go to sleep, then it's planning and preparing for the next day. You work hard, and you took your work home, and you're not the only one. You're not the only teacher that did that. And again, that dedication to your kids, almost all teachers are exactly like that. And I'm glad that you're repeating kind of what our teacher friend said last week. So understand that about teachers. So we're going to get moving on, and you already touched on segment 2, which is good. But I've known you since your arrival in Wanakee in 2012. You have such an outgoing, awesome personality, always willing to spend a few moments shooting the breeze. I'm glad you took your couple hours. Now what we thought was going to be an hour has turned into about an hour and a half. But that's who you are, extremely dedicated to your students and their families, which is why I thought it was surprising when I heard you were stepping away from the classroom. I think I got a little choked up, but I put that mask on of I'm tough. And we'll talk a little. You already alluded to maybe that voice now telling you to do something else, and I'm glad you had people to lean on. So we're coming up on the halfway point of the show, but before we take a little break, I want to mention again our sponsor, Buck and Honey's. They sponsored our remote studios since podcast 1, and I'm darn glad about that. They facilitate the fun, ensure each guest has a memorable experience at a great value with 4 locations in the Madison area. People keep coming back. So your 19-year teaching career came to an end, but I don't think we can say for sure it's an end, because you could go back in June 2023 with more things suggesting a job change than calling you back to the classroom. You took a leap of faith, changed careers. You'll share how challenging that was and how you learned to survive and thrive in segment number 2. So we will have you back. So those of you that are listening, don't change that channel. We will be right back after a short little message.
If you, a loved one, or someone you know who is experiencing a physical, mental, or emotional crisis, there is help or resources out there. Contact NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness helpline, at 1-800-950-6264. This is a free service providing information, resource referrals, and support to people living with a mental illness, their family, providers, and the public. United Way 211 is available 24/7, 365, and offers free confidential assistance. They connect people with the local programs and services that can help. Dial 211. Crisis services, dial 911. Suicide prevention lifeline, call 988. To connect via web chat, go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Along with those numbers, there is help. You just need to utter 3 words: I need help. Now back to the show.
Okay, we are back. We are back. That is from my favorite movie, The Hangover, one of the Hangovers. Segment 2 is we're going to talk about Ace Hardware of Wanakee. Some of the listeners probably shop at Ace Hardware. If you're in Wanakee, go there. They got great prices. They've got friendly customer, 5-star customer service, and they've got all your needs in terms of hardware. So in the summer of 2023, you had some professional decisions to make. And that surrounded taking that leap of faith that we talked about in the end of the first segment. But you didn't take that just by yourself. You included a lot of people in that leap of faith. What were some of the decisions that you had to think about or you had to consider?
Absolutely. So it was a very reflective time for me to think about stepping away from teaching, which is something that I'd been doing for almost 20 years, something that I love, something that I knew I was good at. I was scared to step away. I felt guilty. I felt like I was letting down my students. I felt like I was letting down my coworkers. I felt like I was letting down my family because this was something that I had set out to do. And I had always envisioned myself retiring as a teacher. But when that summer came about, and I had to make some decisions even before that summer because we have to notify the school of our intent, right, to return. You know all about that. And so when I had finally made the decision, and what I had done is I had asked for a year leave of absence. That was kind of my hope, is that they would
sabbatical.
Yes, and I missed that sabbatical by 1 year because I was 9 years instead of 10. Okay. So I had to petition essentially to the board and to the district to take a year leave of absence. That was kind of my original plan, is that I would step away for a year and help my parents, and just until they could find additional work or additional employment for, they were shorthanded and they needed someone to kind of step in. And it's hard to hire full-time day people. It's not as easy as one would think. So I requested this year leave of absence and I was denied because it's hard to hire a 1-year teacher. Like, teachers don't want to get hired for a year. They want to know they have some stability as well. So I understood the reasoning behind why I was denied. I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt a little, because here I felt like I am someone who works hard. I do a good job.
I'm from here.
I'm from here. I graduated from here. And so, yeah, it stung a little, but I got over it and said, well, this kind of makes my decision a little bit easier. I know what I have to do. So I put in my resignation letter, and that was really hard. Like you talked about tears. I struggled a lot with that, but I knew it was the right thing for me at the time. I knew that once I would get over some of the guilt, I would see the clarity. I would see that this is a temporary decision. It wasn't like I was leaving teaching saying I'll never go back. I'm going to work at Ace Hardware the rest of my life. I knew it was temporary. My mom made it very clear it was going to be temporary. Again, her voice was still there. But so that essentially, I talked a lot to my husband because I needed it to be something that he was on board with. I talked a lot to my closest friends, my closest girlfriends, who are a lifeline for me. I knew in my heart I'd already made the decision, but I just needed to say it out loud. Because once you say it out loud, you can't take it back, right? Yep. Once you make it public and once people hear you say it, they help continue to provide that clarity. And all of my friends and family were supportive. They all said, yes, you need to do this for you and for your family right now. And so once that decision was made, once I said it out loud, there was no turning back. The hardest part was saying goodbye on that last day, when we always do we would do our teacher kind of recognition, our barbecue. The retirees, yeah. And I had a lot of my closest coworkers retiring at the same time. So for me, there was a lot of emotion tied into that day. I was saying goodbye to people that were retiring. I was leaving, not retiring. but just stepping away. So that was a very emotional day for me. I definitely went home and just needed some time to process.
So I know we talked about Ace Hardware and your mom being that voice of, hey, we could really use some help. You have a plan B. Did you even think about maybe like entertain some other plan C's? Because I know when I said that I was going to retire, I told the world early ahead of time, and I started looking around, and I had a former principal friend of mine say, when people find out that you're going to retire, you're going to have more job offers than you think. And I'm like, whatever. Did you consider anything else besides Ace at all?
I didn't at the time. I mean, I think I was in such a place of trying to accept that my teaching career was coming to a temporary end, and that they had, my parents had offered me this position to help with just finding some more clarity. I really didn't look outside of those two arenas, and I still struggle with that. I have to figure out what I want to be when I grow up at 47. And so I think one of the things that was important for me in this process was showing my girls that you are going to choose a career at some point. You're going to pick something that hopefully fulfills you and drives you and motivates you and pays you well. But sometimes in life, things change, and that's okay. And not to feel like you have to continue doing something because it's what you've always done. I wanted them to see that this was scary, and mom cried a lot. But at the end of the day, it's what we needed as a family. And I just didn't ever want them to see me in a place where I'm complaining and I'm grouchy and I'm irritated and I'm tired. And I didn't want to be the mom that, was moody all the time, wasn't happy in their career, complaining about it. And then they start to think work is about complaining. And that's not what I want them to go into their careers thinking or knowing. That, you can love something, life can happen, you can change, you can stop doing something that you love to do something that maybe you don't love as much because you need to find clarity. I'm good at what I do at ACE. I love people, right? I mean, anybody that comes into ACE, I could talk to people all day long. But it's not that position, and helping my parents out has been wonderful, but that's not who I am.
Yeah, it's crazy. You talked about a couple of characteristics that I don't think I've ever seen. The irritated, the angry, the tired. Like I said, I've known you as just this vibrant person that's got a great personality. You've got time for just about everybody. So I don't want to see that other Kristan.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. So I think it's for the listeners that are out there that are considering a job change, or they know, hey, my little brother or my sister or my cousin or my neighbor is miserable in their job. Some people actually do stay in their job and they stay miserable until that day they retire, or unless something else happens ahead of time that forces their hand. And sometimes they get sick, they get mentally ill, they have to take time off. You're here telling us that it's okay to make a job change and come out in the other end after you've gone and survived the emotions of that, and you're thriving. And that's why I chose you to come on the show to talk about that. So if you were to give someone advice based on your experiences, what would you tell them about making a job change when most are considering retirement? You are somewhere in the mid-40s.
Yes.
And about 10 to 12 years in the teaching world of when you were going to retire. What what are 3 to 5 things that you would say, and I'll help you out if you want to say the first one or the second or the third one. I'll write them down and then we'll come back to them.
I think the first thing is take care of yourself.
I love it.
Take care of yourself now,
Okay.
because we may not get a second chance to take care of ourselves. And what I've noticed is we work really, really hard, right? Our whole lives, we work really, really hard so we can get to retirement. And then we hope we're healthy enough to enjoy that retirement. And the older I've gotten, I've seen more and more people work really, really hard to get to retirement only to end up sick and not being able to enjoy that time that you've earned. So the first piece of advice is take care of yourself now. If you notice that you are not fulfilled, if you noticed your personality changing, if you notice things about your life that don't drive you to get out of bed every day, it's time to make a change. It's time to take care of yourself and make that change.
I like that. The one thing that you talked about just now, and then we talked about it a little off air, that reminds me of that when you're on an airplane and they talk about the pressure changing in the cabin and the masks are going to come down. And I use this reference all the time in that put the mask on yourself first. And they tell you to do that. Put the mask on yourself first before you go and help somebody else next to you. And that falls in that thing of taking care of yourself. And then I had a personal trainer / fitness coach on about a week ago as well. And he talked about that, and that's his business. Is most of us think about the financial part of retirement where we're sticking stuff away for retirement. He's in the business of helping you think about your health so that when you do retire, you can enjoy retirement. And most of us in retirement have or are going to have grandchildren that we want to spend time with. So I think you hit it right on the head, taking care of yourself. And I'm going to say this probably for you is emotionally, physically, spiritually, all of those good things. So taking care of yourself. I love it. All right. Number 2.
You kind of segued into number 2 is contact and connect with people who can help support you through your decisions, through the processing. Talk out loud to someone about what you're thinking and what you're doing, whether it be a financial advisor. Make sure your ducks are in a row because that's an added stress. Talk to family. Talk to those in the field that you are leaving and a field maybe that you're thinking about entering. You know, kind of create your tribe of people that you can connect with to say, this is what I'm thinking, but I'm not in a place yet where I can make a decision. I need support and help. So connect with those who can bring maybe some experiences that you don't personally have. You know, somebody who's neutral, who's not going to persuade you one way or another. You know, it's good to have people that challenge your train of thought, that make you stop and think like, is this really the best decision for me? Am I making this decision rationally, or, you know, did something happen at work and now I'm so fed up and now I'm ready to be done. So really look at your own situation and connect with people who can help you through that, because what you don't want to do is make your decision and then regret. You know, and there's always going to be pieces of you that's going to wonder, did I make the right decision? You know, we can trace that back to most big decisions we make in our life. So it's really about having people to help you through that process.
Yeah, just as human beings, and because I'm into researching mental health and connected, you talk about the connection with people. You have a great connection with your husband and your kids, and you talked openly about talking openly with your family, and then you've got that strong bond with your parents, and and you talk to other people in the profession. We're built to stay connected with people, and it just goes back to the caveman days of we need to, you know, we're stronger in groups versus by ourselves, and who knows, maybe if you would have stuck it out another year or two, you might have been contemplating all of these situations by yourself alone, and that's not how we're built. So that's awesome. Number 3.
I think also just taking time to reflect.
Take time to reflect. Like daily. Yeah, daily.
Like
okay.
Not just, okay, now I'm thinking about this, but to really take time to reflect over the last week, month, year, to really kind of dig deep, because a lot of these things that we're talking about, it's easier said than done. Life is crazy. Like, who has time to sit there and reflect? Like, we're all just trying to get through 24 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of time to sit down and reflect and to really have some internal conversations with ourselves, much less, external conversations with those around us. So you've got to find time to really sit down and think about, okay, what are my goals? What do I want out of situation A? What do I want out of situation B? If I leave my profession that I'm currently in, what goals do I have moving forward? And figure out what is going to drive those goals, because otherwise you're just making decisions kind of,
some people would say willy-nilly,
right? And I believe there's always a leap of faith involved in everything that we do, but that leap of faith should have grounding to it, So yeah, really think about, what are my goals for the next week, the next month, the next year, the next 5 years, and match that to what and how you plan on reaching those goals.
Yeah, I know you talked about goals. I think have goals going forward, look back and, did I achieve these goals? Do I need to rework my goals? There's all kinds of different pieces to that. When you talked about taking the time, the first thing that I thought of as you were talking and when we talked off air before we started this whole thing, you've been pretty grateful for the stuff you have. You talked about your kids, you talked about your marriage to your husband and the job changes he's gone through. You talked about your parents, and you talked very fondly of your mom being that voice of, maybe you should try this and maybe you should try that. That made me think of the gratitude thing, that you look back on how good you do have it, which I think made the decisions a little easier for you. Am I right on that?
You're 100% correct. I am so grateful. And not everyone has the support system that I had when making this decision. So for me to speak upon, what that would be like not to have that support, I can't. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's in a position that doesn't have the support behind them, I hope that they can find that support, whether it be in the community. There's a lot of resources out there. And finding resources is not always easy. We talk about all the time, you and I talked about resources that are on college campuses, resources that are in our communities, resources that are all over, but they're not always easy to find. And if you're struggling emotionally, mentally, it's hard to access that part of your brain that says, oh, here's how I'm going to find these resources, and this is going to allow me to then be connected to someone. So
yeah, you talked a little bit about making your intentions known, that you were going to be stepping away from the classroom, and you had people coming in and reinforcing you that it's okay to do that. And then you probably also mentioned that, hey, I think I'm going to go back to the hardware store and help my mom and dad. And the decision became a lot easier because you had this circle of friends that were helping reinforce that, and you're going to do good. And this is what fits your personality. You're outgoing. You're going to be able to talk to your customers that way, and you love to help people, and you're thriving. So what an episode. You shared an experience on making a job change with kids in school and an enjoyable, stable career. You stepped away from that. You've epitomized the survive and thrive mentality by leaving the classroom. I'm sure it wasn't easy with many nights wondering, is this the right move? But you survived and have thrived. With a daughter in college and 3 still at home, you are thriving with renewed energy to have a new career and and also doing it as an amazing wife, mother, and coworker. So a lot of people who are making a career change and struggle with their mental health and physical health, and you didn't. So I'm going to give you just this last couple of minutes, seconds. Why have you thrived?
Relationships, connections. I had to really look within myself and ask for help, especially with the emotional part of leaving. I think that being able to really tap into those who I love near and dear and be completely transparent and very, just very vulnerable and say, I can't do this without love and support. I can't make this change and feel good about myself unless I am completely and utterly honest and open about where and what I was feeling. So I honestly, it wasn't the easiest transition. There were moments that were really, really challenging just in terms of finding my identity. I mean, we're all driven by our identity and our purpose. And I wasn't sure what my purpose was. And so I just had to be very, very vulnerable at times and acknowledge that when I was struggling, I needed help. And I turned to those that are the most important to me. And that is how I got through this big life change.
There's going to be some friends of yours that are listening, and maybe your daughters and your husband. And if those are the only people that are going to listen to this podcast, I hope they're not, because there's going to be people that are going to reference this. You got to listen to podcast number 18 of Survive and Thrive. There's this woman who used to be a teacher, just like you are. Like I talked about, a neighbor, a sibling, or cousin or whatever that's going to go through a job change. They can listen to this episode and get. I said 3 things. You said 3 things. You probably talked about 15 that somebody's going to be writing down. And the amount of pride that your friends and your family are going to have that they were a part of this, and they probably are going to be happy about having you say those things about them. It's going to be kind of touching. So if you decide to make a career change, Kristan just shared an experience that our listeners can learn from. These 3 things can help you survive and thrive, just like Kristan. That was take care of yourself. Maybe put the mask on before you put the mask on somebody else. Contact other people for support. Those relationships and connections she made this job change easier. And then take some time to reflect on your goals, have goals, and then also squeeze in some gratitude for the stuff that you do have, because most of us do have things that we are grateful for. Sometimes we just focus on the negative. So on our next episode, we will have another amazing guest who will share how they survived and thrive. And if you have a story to share, or you know someone who does, please reach out to me at tdecorah@gmail.com. That's TDECORAH@gmail.com. Until next time, hang in there with whatever you happen to be going through, and with hard work, dedication, determination, goals, connections, all of those things that Kristan said today, you can survive and thrive as well. Until next time, take care.